Thank you and good afternoon. This is Sam Vaughn for Sam Sports Report. Today's date is Friday, November 10th, 2023.
Patrick Mahomes has been off target on just 14% of his throws to wide receivers this season, on track to be the best of his career. But the issue is the wide receivers haven't been able to make plays. They've caught just 64% of their passes from Mahomes and dropped 8%. That's by far the worst rate in the NFL. Hawk, this sounds like I'm being like, oh, the quarterback's great and the receivers aren't so great. But the numbers are what they are. Yeah. I'm not talking about you, at least. What's going on? We think you're great. What's going on with those wide receivers?
Yeah, they got to play better. Yeah. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. When you looked at last game and even the previous weeks, there are times when they are trying to push down the field. They just can't. And this team doesn't have a legit deep threat, an ability to connect on some of these long throws. Yeah. The offense is going to be null and void. There was one to Justin Watson on this one where he kind of slows up out of the break and he misses by just a tick. There's another one to MVS as well where he chooses the wrong track and then it turns into a drop pass. Now, when you watch this offense, yes, it is predicated on Travis Kelce. He is wide receiver number one. He's a 34-year-old tight end who is seeing a lot of double coverage, triple coverage, Dan, and to expect a 34-year-old tight end, no matter how great he is, to be able to routinely beat double and triple coverage for your offense, that's not a great strategy. The receivers have to step up.
I think the problem with the Chiefs is they know the question, they just don't know the answers on offense. And even Patrick said it himself, like with that defense, if this offense gets to what it's capable of, they're tough to beat. First of all, they're tough to beat anyway. Yep. The question is if this offense gets in how. So, first of all, we've talked about this with the tackles. Now, watch the right tackle here. So, Jet McKinnon is there on his hip to chip that defensive end. Now, I've heard everybody offensive line-wise say, as a tackle, when you know you have your chip here, there's no reason to go back and out. You can sit inside because you know your help is outside. Ball gets snapped. It's a great chip, but Taylor is oversetting. So that allows Jalen Phillips that kind of easy access. Second of all, because of the pressure, no one's open. And this is that shot you talked about with Justin Watson downfield that, gosh, that throw is almost perfect, but it's needed. This is a little bit later in the game. This is that shot to MVS. You talked about this with the pressure. The second thing is the double teams. Like you're sitting there going, if not Travis, who? As the safeties drop down, they double Travis. They got eyes on Patrick as a potential scrambler. You got man-to-man coverage. Those tackles are starting to get kind of squeezed and rushed around the edge. Patrick's got to climb and throw at the same time. Again, it's a perfect throw, essentially, if not for that drop. I have a question for you. Because we've talked about here's my final point on this. The teams that they're going to have to beat are going to be able to rush the passer on the outside. Like you think about Cincinnati, you think about Baltimore, you think about Cleveland, okay, to get back to the Super Bowl. We've talked about wide receiver separation. If the wide receivers are lacking the ability to separate, is there something they can do to help that? Like, I know Jimmy's and Joe's are a real thing, but MVS was really good last year. And I think Watson's a good, is there something they can do to help that?
Honestly, it has to come from the scheme, to be real. From the offensive play calling. You have to know what your limitation is at the wide receiver position, and they're trying to scheme them open. Yeah. It's not even a scheme thing. I don't want to make it seem like the scheme isn't matching their personnel, because when you put those plays on, Dan, those are big plays that you're looking for. Right. You have to, those two big throws, you got to hit at least one of those, preferably both, but at least one to really show your offense that, hey, we can do this.
Yeah. I know it's blasphemous to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and their offense not being good and being limited, but they limited, fellas. Like, listen, I just got off a segment earlier in this show talking about what the Jets needed to do with Zach Wilson. Andy Reid and Matt Nagy needs to figure out ways to be more multiple in football games. It's almost not their fault though, right? When you got 15, we just waiting to break the seal. We don't need to change anything. We're just waiting for the seal to break. We waiting for all of this stuff to come together. We know the deep balls will be there. We know we'll start being prolific on offense. And I think right now they're a little drunk on that, as opposed to going in and saying, you know what, our receivers, to your point, Hawk, are not uncovering. They not playing as well. Dan, I talked about these tackles in the preseason, and I said, look, this is going to be a big deal for this team as the season goes along. So now the Kansas City Chiefs offense, which we've never seen them at this point, they have to become more creative. As crazy as that sounds to us, They have to become more creative, more multiple. And I know y'all get sick of me talking about the run game. Well, if it's not the run game, it's got to be the screen game. It's got to be rub routes. It's got to be something created to help these guys not only build confidence, but uncover for them throughout the play call.
I just did that game this past week, and one crazy stat. When Tyreek was there, Patrick had 44 touchdowns that went over 20 yards in the air. Like the ball traveled over 20 yards in the air for a touchdown.
Yes,
Since
man.
Tyreek left, 2.
Wow.
That was shocking to me.
Yeah, and I mean, that's been a couple years, but the other difference is Eric Bieniemy's not there anymore. So you wonder if some of that has to do. I realize Andy Reid's a great offensive mind, but we'll keep an eye on there.
They would definitely be running it more if he was there.
Yeah. Dan.
The Chiefs will play the Eagles next week. Kansas plays Texas Tech. The Hawks are favored by 4.5. It'll be Jason Bean and Brett Moten at the quarterback position, and players to watch out for at the running back position: Devin Neal, who has 829 yards, and Thurr Brooks has over 1,000 yards and is 7th in the rushing lead in the NCAA. Kick is at 11. Kansas State plays. Kansas State lost to Texas last week, in which they fell short on a bad decision by Chris Kleiman on an opportunity to tie the game. The Cats decided to go for it. They lost that game, as we said, as they missed the 4th down conversion. Will Howard and Avery Johnson at the quarterbacks. Watch out for DJ Guidance and for Kansas State. And at the defensive line position, Gabriel Hall for Baylor. Kansas State linebacker to watch out for is Daniel Green on the defense. The Cats are favored by 21.5. Kick is at 2. Mizzou will play Tennessee. Quarterbacks Brady Cook and J.J. Elment is at the quarterback position. Former Michigan player to watch out for. Jay Wright is also a player to watch out for at the running back position, and that's who the players we watch out for. He had 826 yards, and Cody Schrader at the running back position has more yards, but Joe Wright gets more yards a pop. At the running back position for Mizzou, Cody Schrader has 919 yards. But as we said, less yards on a carry. Both teams are 7-2. Tennessee is favored by 2. I'm taking Mizzou 30-25. Michigan State plays Penn State. Quarterback J.J. McCarthy and Drew Aller both have had solid seasons. Defensive tackle Devon Ellis and defensive tackle Chris Jenkins will also match up. And also watch out for Devin Ellis, who is the best player on the defensive tackle on Michigan, one of the best players on the team. Game time is at 11. Michigan, Washington. Washington needs to stay in the playoff race to become undefeated. They had a high-scoring game last week, 52-40. Quarterback Cam Reesing will be at the quarterback position for the Utah Utes a few games earlier in the season. That's why Utah hasn't been as good. One of the reasons. Kickoff is at 2:30. Washington favored by 9. It'll be Ole Miss getting a tough test against Georgia, who's won 26 in a row. And defensive players for the Georgia Bulldogs: Ole Miss safety Tayson Washington and Samuel Madu at the defensive tackle for the Georgia, best player on their team. Mizzou will play Memphis. That game tips off at 8 Central tonight. Jordan Bauer at 6'11" will be the senior, and Mizzou Noah Carter is at the forward, but will play like the 5 because Missouri is a smaller team. He chipped in with 50. Mizzou and Memphis tip off at 8 on the SEC Network. We do not have enough time to go through the Kansas State players. Since it's a small game, we'll skip them. Kansas hosts Manhattan. Tip is at 8. Kansas State plays Burlingame. Game time is at 8. Kansas will play Kentucky. This is Sam Vaughn for Sam Sports Report.